Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston.
And there's never been more of a clarion call that we need a strategy. Right now our strategy is West Virginia. It's not a good strategy. That's the why. The how. The how is we need to get out of this either or, and we got to do both and. We need to attract high-wage jobs. We need jobs. We also need to invest in the kind of vibrant communities and community infrastructure that make people want to live here, stay here. Because without talent, you don't have business. Without business, there's nowhere for talent to work. We need both.
That opening clip was Jared Fleisher, who leads government affairs and economic development for ROC, Dan Gilbert's family of companies. Jared was in Lansing Tuesday to testify before the House Economic Development Committee on a package of bills that would shift some funds from SOAR and traditional economic development models to other community-based things, in this case, specifically transit. And he had some very interesting and passionate things to say during that testimony. So I spoke with him about it and why he feels so strongly about this and why he thinks this could really be transformative, perhaps an overused word, but one that applies here, for much of the state of Michigan. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. So once again, as promised, I'm here with Jared Fleisher, who leads government affairs and economic development for ROC, which is Dan Gilbert's family of companies. Jared, thanks for taking time to do this.
It's my pleasure.
So first, talk a little bit about your background and the work that you do and how that dovetails with your passion for public transportation.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. Went to Harvard and Harvard Law School and was a Washington lawyer. And by circumstance, ended up doing some work for Dan Gilbert and built a relationship and fell in love with what he was doing in the state of Detroit. And he convinced me to move to the city. And it was the best thing I ever did because being part of the transformation of the city, something that's positive, that is tangible, that's happening every day, is a great way to spend your professional life. But when I was a lawyer in Washington, I represented local governments and economic development groups and transportation authorities. And I ended up doing a lot of work for transit clients, including the Denver Regional Transportation District, when they were building out, Denver Union Station and their line to the airport and, the various lines. And I saw firsthand how transformative those investments were. And, just watched as Denver went from a somewhat sleepy community to being, the place that every young person wanted to be, in the Intermountain West. And
from farther away.
And farther away. Exactly. I think you may even have a daughter who can, testify to that.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I've ridden that light rail from the airport to downtown Denver, and it's pretty darn cool. You're right. So why do you think it's been, I guess, coming here from somewhere else and watching Detroit evolve, why do you think it's been so difficult in Michigan? I mean, the simple answer we always think is because we're the auto state and we were all about cars, but it's got to be more than that, right?
It is more than that. I do think that that's a part of the story. We obviously had the most advanced interurban streetcar system in the 1950s in the country. And then, as we kind of became the car capital of the world, we tore up the tracks or buried the tracks and really, built an environment that was oriented around the automobile, right? Big roads, low density over large areas. But that can't be the totality of the explanation because in Los Angeles, they did the same thing. In the 50s, they tore up all the rail tracks and the streetcar tracks. But yet they, in recent times, realized that they needed transit to deal with, congestion, to give folks mobility options, to, provide, options for folks who, are coming out of college, can't afford a car, working, job where they, trying to build up to be able to, have more resources, but they need, transit now. Young people that don't want to be, dealing with parking, paying for parking, paying for car insurance, wanting to go out and drink and, have a good time. And that's not, compatible with driving. So you see other communities that even had our history, nonetheless, in recent decades, make substantial investments in transit. I think that, we've been hobbled in our region by a few things. Number one, a lot comes down to leadership. I give great credit to Dave Coulter and to Warren Evans and Mike Duggan, who the leadership that we have in place currently in Southeast Michigan knows we have to make these investments to attract talent, retain talent, and grow. So a lot of it is leadership, but we have that leadership in place now. And I think the in Los Angeles and other communities in Denver that, kind of made these investments starting, really seriously, 20 something years ago, we're very, very late to the game. We had the leadership in place now to that sees the importance of it, but kind of the psychology, or the opposition became very, very entrenched, and it's just a higher hill to climb.
Yeah. Well, I think that you made this point in your testimony, and Representative Kofia from Traverse City made the same point that this is not just about Southeast Michigan. It's not just about Grand Rapids or the big cities south of US 10. This is going to be transformative for the entire state. And there's lots of rural agencies that rely on transit too. Because you've been obviously Detroit focused in your efforts, can you talk about that, why it's bigger than just Detroit?
Absolutely. So, the most important thing is we want to meet the actual needs of different regions in the state. And Northern Michigan is different than Southeast Michigan. Southwest Michigan is different than Metro Detroit, right? The more rural areas are different than, the more urban areas of our state. So what the legislation that, the hearing was on says is, listen, we're not going to tell you top down what you do. You're going to tell us bottom up. So, those regions can say, this is our top mobility priority in terms of making our region more attractive place to live, work, and play. This is our top mobility priority that's tied to our growth strategy for our region. For example, in Traverse City and in Marquette, their top priority may well be an airport expansion. If you think about it, Marquette's a wonderful, beautiful place. Traverse City too, but it's far from a lot of other places. If they want to grow as a place to, live, for folks doing remote work, play, for tourism, they need air service. And this bill is flexible to allow each community to invest in the transformational mobility project that they need. In Southeast Michigan, we do think it's transit. We do think that if you build, a high quality bus rapid transit line on Woodward Avenue, the main spine of our region from Detroit to Pontiac, just think about what that could mean with, dedicated lane, nice stations. For everybody who lives in the region, you got to go downtown to a ball game or to, go out to a concert or, just to have a good time. You don't have to worry about driving, spending $40 in parking, having a few beers. You can do what the rest of the country does and have high quality, transit take you there. And what you see when you build that kind of high quality transit is that development goes around it. And what do we need to do to grow? We need dense, walkable communities in our metropolitan areas. It's a key part of our state growth strategy. And if you have that kind of high quality transit on Woodward Avenue, you create kind of these anchors or hubs to do dense mixed use development. And dense development is how you grow our state. Going out to the airport, obviously, is another big thing for our region. If we could actually imagine if we could have, the Amtrak line that currently connects, downtown Detroit and Dearborn, or Ford's headquartered, Michigan Central Station, with their opening today, the airport, Ann Arbor. Imagine if we had more frequent service on that existing commuter rail line where you could reliably and quickly get on a commuter rail line between Ann Arbor, that major economic hub, airport, Dearborn, train station, downtown. Imagine what that would mean for our region's economy. At the same time, Northern Michigan is different. Air service is what they need. Air service is what they can get.
Yeah, well, along those lines, there's been studies and discussion of a rail line between Ann Arbor and Traverse City. That would go a long way too. So, yeah,
absolutely.
But that commuter corridor you're talking about that it would incorporate the airport and downtown has been a dream for a long time, and that would make a huge difference. And when you talk about a mesh system where M1 rail, the people mover, and then a BRT could all work to complement each other. I mean, you've already seen what M1 rail has done for the Woodward corridor, for that segment of the corridor in terms of that investment and that density. So, I mean, there's evidence out there, right?
I mean, there's been, something like $8 billion of investment on the Woodward corridor since the M1 rail, came in. And listen, it's not, the silver bullet. You build it and automatically this development happens, right? You have to have, the right, land use policies and the right leadership and vision. But there's just no question. I mentioned earlier in my remarks here that I worked in Washington, D.C., where when I lived in Washington, D.C., I lived actually in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., on the Orange Line. And there's a picture of the Orange Line, before they built the metro, and it looks just like cow pastures. And then you take a satellite view of the Orange Line today, Northern Virginia going into Washington, D.C., and it is giant hubs of development around each of the metro stations. With the right land use policies, you can leverage these transportation hubs to do dense mixed-use development, and dense mixed-use development is how you grow, because you can, it's literally dense concentrations of people. But more than that, young people, talented people, that's what they want. They want to live in a neighborhood where, they can walk to a bar, they can walk to, a restaurant, they can walk and do a little bit of shopping. They want that, all of that at their footsteps. And, by building these dense transit-oriented neighborhoods, you not only grow our state, you not only keep our kids here, you not only attract talent here, you add all that up into what we need to do. We're 49th in the nation in population growth, 49th in the nation. So, guys, we got to change what we're doing. It's not working. And I'll kind of go back to the very first question you asked me, why is it taking us so long? I would say, let's look at, over this period, we have stagnated in population and prosperity. We're second to last in the nation of population growth. Maybe we got to do some of these things that we haven't been doing if we're going to change our trajectory.
Yeah, no, I think you made that point. I kind of wondered if we're enough generations removed now from, everybody knows about the Great Migration, but along with that, a heck of a lot of people made their way to Detroit and industrial cities from Appalachia. So you've got people in your midst who are probably third, fourth generation, people from West Virginia. And I wonder what they think when they hear that reference, because you're right on with it, for sure.
I mean, no disrespect. We could be 49th to anybody. Being 49th, 50 is not where you want to be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We will continue the conversation right after a quick break.
Know before you go. Head on over to MyDrive to check out the latest on road construction and possible delays along your route. For a detailed map, head over to michigan.gov/drive.
Talk a little bit about that, I guess, what you have found in talking to younger generations about why this is important to them. Who are the people buying those condos in Midtown or Corktown? I see the prices and I'm like, where do those people work? How do they do that? But those are the people that would say they want viable public transportation, right?
No doubt. And listen, one of the reasons that our state is stagnating in population and prosperity is because we are losing talented young professionals and we are not attracting talented young professionals. The folks who are most mobile in today's economy are young people who have options, right? Educated, talented young folks. They're the ones who are moving. And, we grow them here. We educate them at the University of Michigan or Michigan State or wherever it is. And then Chicago or New York or, Texas or California or Denver, or Nashville or Charlotte benefit from our investment in growing this talent. So we apps to raise statewide prosperity. We need to have a strategy that keeps talented young people here and attracts talented young people. They have choices. So what do they want? You got to think of it like a product. You want to convince somebody to buy your product. Your product is Michigan. You got to give them what they want in the product. And what do they want? They want dense, vibrant communities that have transit options. That's what they want. They want good paying jobs, high wage, often high tech jobs. So this package, the transit piece, as you know, is the mobility piece is part of a bigger package that tries to do all of this. Invest in bringing high tech, high wage jobs. Invest in building vibrant communities through programs that support downtown revitalization, investing in main streets, town centers, waterfronts, That's the second piece of the package. The third piece of the package is affordable housing. You mentioned, the high-priced condos in Midtown. Well, I'll tell you what, we have a much bigger catchment if we can also invest in attainable housing. We have a much bigger band of folks we can keep here and bring here. And then the fourth piece is the transit mobility. But you put them all together, and it's basically saying, what do we need to do to be successful? We need to attract and retain these people. How do we do it? High wage jobs, vibrant communities, transit options, and in many cases, attainable housing.
Well, speaking of transit options, it's definitely a point of pride here in Grand Rapids in a friendly geographic way that they had the state's first BRT, and they have two now. So,
yeah. And I was talking to the director of the Rapid, and you think about who transit is for. The most popular, successful line in Grand Rapids is the Laker line that takes all the students to Grand Valley. So this is these investments. Literally, we talk about attracting and retaining talent. These investments are literally used by students to go to college.
Yeah, no, you couldn't have a campus, out in Ottawa County tied to a campus downtown without it now. It's really important. I liked the reference you made to the seesawing economic development strategy in the state. Talk about what that means.
So Michigan is schizophrenic on economic development. We are a pendulum that goes one way and then swings hard back, the other way as, political party control changes, or we do something and then we're like, oh, no, we're kind of victims of our own success. We invest in SOAR and we got these big, giant manufacturing and battery plants and other advanced energy plants. And, now we got to stop because we did it. It's the worst possible approach to long-term prosperity to have ever-changing short-term strategies. Okay. Like I said in my testimony, if anybody wants to be great at anything, you want to be a great basketball player, you better get at that free throw line. You better shoot a lot of free throws, right? You better be committed to it for the long term and focused on what you're doing. And
you made a piano player reference there. And so I'm guessing you've read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, and that's where that came from, the 10,000 hours theory.
That's exactly right. And we're at a tipping point too, to, just keep the references coming, right now. But to put that in concrete terms, the state's the current economic programs expire next year. And where we are right now is, so talk about seesawing, we're actually going to go right off a cliff because they expire. And at this moment where, the Population Commission's pointing out that we're 49th in the nation, that our median income has dropped from 120% of the national average to 90% of the national average. Not only are we going to go off a cliff, but we have no way forward. We have no way forward. So, for folks listening to this, for your leaders in the state government, we're at this inflection point, this critically important point for the future of our state. And is the answer we're just going to do nothing? We're literally just going to fight with each other and have no vision and strategy going forward? Or we have a comprehensive plan right here that invests in all the things that we know we need to grow: high wage jobs, affordable housing, vibrant communities, transit and mobility solutions. It's a comprehensive package. It's on the table, and it's long term. It's long term. And the alternative is that we, like I think I said in my testimony, we go off a cliff, we end up at a dead end. That's the alternative.
I also think it's symbolic. Setting aside whether any given agency thinks this is enough money for considering their needs, whether it's the cities or the northern. This says the legislature and state leaders are very serious about transit and public transportation, and that's important too, I think. Tell me, I guess, what with all these things you've talked about in the cliff and some of these depressing metaphors, what makes you bullish on Detroit and on Michigan as for its future?
I think Michigan has tremendous potential. A lot of the broadest dynamics about population movements, a lot of them are under our control, but there are some macro things. For a very long time, people moved to the Sun Belt, right? And policy matters, but the sun matters too, right?
They want our water.
They want our. So my point in saying that is, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the weather, but it's 120 degrees in the summer in Phoenix and in Houston. I really do believe that Michigan is I mean, it's a very pleasant place to be compared to 120 degrees in Phoenix. It's a beautiful state, like you said, with fresh water everywhere, green everywhere. It's a beautiful state. It's a relatively affordable state. It's a state that has the potential to have great cities, right? I mean, great bones and so much progress in Detroit and Grand Rapids. We have the potential for greatness, but again, to go back to the analogy of the piano player, you can have the potential for greatness and not put in the time and do the right things, and you're not going to be a very good piano player. We have the potential. We've got to put in the time and do the right things to achieve our potential.
Yeah, well said, Jared. I think often it takes a transplant to really appreciate what we have here.
I love it here. I love the city of Detroit. I love Grand Rapids. I love, going north into the beautiful towns up there and the lakes. It's an incredible state. We owe it to, what God gave us and to our children to, realize this potential.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you very much. We'll have to talk again sometime and see how these bills proceed. I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.